Hey guys, it's Punchy, and today we're going to be talking about Abyss Walker and their own Gaia guide. I'm going to be talking about how it performs against other matchups and how viable it is in Gaia. This is the third video of 18 where I'm going to be talking about every single class. All of these videos are only my opinions, so if you have your own opinion, make sure you voice it in the comments below. Anyway, let's get into Abyss Walker. Abyss Walker is for Ultra Sigma Rogue Lineage players that don't need Atomeless as a crutch. They said forget Solons and did their own thing. If you used to walk around your neighborhood hitting people in cars with a giant piece of wood like I did, you would definitely enjoy this class. No matter what your childhood was like, I would definitely recommend Abyss Walker to anybody who needs to stop overthinking. With 2 moves and a giant piece of metal by your side, Abyss Walker can slap anything that looks at them funny. Alright, let's get into how they perform against the other Rogue Lineage classes. Abyss Walker has received some new goodies from the developer team recently that has placed them a little bit higher in my personal tier list. Who do they beat now? Despite most classes having the highest potential for macro combos, I think a new challenger has entered the ring. In my humble opinion, I believe Macro Abyss Walker is the new tier 0 build and is the most meta thing in Gaia. Okay, I'm kidding, we can get to the rest of the video. In my Sigil Knight guide I made a little bit ago, I said Abyss Walker fell short due to undodgeable sword charges. No longer do Abyss Walker get pegged by their mortal enemies, they can now use Mana Shield. Similar to the bacteria in the ocean millions of years ago, Abyss Walker has now evolved into a higher being that can now be defensive. With Sigil's lower movement speed, Abyss can catch them if they aren't being vigilant and shred them with curse stacks. I think this is now a fair matchup and I'm very proud about how far Abyss Walker has come. All jokes aside, if the Sigil Knight you are fighting is very reliant on white flames, you will want to watch out. Several Abyss Walkers are extremely chaotic or vampires, so one misstep around this flame charge could spell out death for an Abyss. Vampire Sigil Knights can regen, but most swings from an Abyss do a lot of damage that can finish the fight in a couple of blows. Unless, of course, you're fighting a Fisherman. Fish is very difficult to fight as an Abyss Walker because you hit too slow to get through most of their dodges. Because Fish is meta on Sigil, this is definitely a threat. Something else to look out for. Your Abyssal Scream will trigger Lannis, so don't use it unless you know it will land. I believe this is a fairly balanced matchup for both Sigil and Abyss, lore accuracy at its finest. Both Dark Sigil Knight and Abyss Walker have so little moves it's common to see their players in the slums of Player General begging for new things to use. Personally, I think that this matchup is fairly balanced due to the new addition of Mana Shield on Abyss Walker. Many Dark Sigils do a ton of damage if you cannot block their moves or spells, but now Abyss has an option. Abyss also has the capability to do multiplicative damage with curse stacks, which when used correctly can kill the tankiest of classes. I think this matchup is balanced compared to some of the other things Abyss Walkers have to fight. If the Abyss Walker is Vampire, they will have to play very cautiously around black flames because that can stop their regeneration and cut through them like paper. I'd say that even if the Dark Sigil Knight is a Vampire, Abyss curse stacks will deal enough damage to almost discount their regeneration. Again, most dodge races that Dark Sigils use are annoying to fight and require more M1s to kill. Very tough to deal with. If the DSK has Snarvender, good luck trying to fight because if you miss your hits, expect to be sent into the floor. Lastly, Lannis is what Dark Sigils use, but it's not too bad because it only gets triggered by Abyssal Scream. Blacksmith hits hard, but Abyss hits harder. Abyss Walker can now Mana Shield everything that isn't a hammer, so shards will have little effect. To be honest, I do feel bad for any Blacksmith that gets tossed around like a sack of potatoes by these chaotic bullies. At least Blacksmith has statted out armor and Silver Guard in an attempt to survive. Dinakari and Hassledon Blacksmiths are fairly common in the combat Blacksmith meta and can deal serious damage to any class in the game. Of course, dodge races like the Zin or Fisherman can impede Abyss Walker due to its slow attack speed, but they aren't as common on Blacksmith. Something that can counter Blacksmith with dodges is playing defensively or waiting for an opening. If the Abyss is a Vampire, they will need to be waiting for the Ruby and Opal shards to pop so they can get them out of the way. If a Vampire isn't careful, these shards will chew them up. Inversely, Abyss Walker can deal with Vampires as well with their high damage output, so Vampire, Blacksmith knockback, and damage resistance will probably be more annoying than the regen. Abyss Walker still has a clear advantage in this fight. Samurai speed is problematic for Abyss Walkers due to their slow swing speed and movement speed. It's pretty tough for them to run away from any combo which Samurais are great at extending. If Abyss Walkers try to hit out of combo, they won't be able to. Also, flowing counter pretty much prevents Abyss from doing anything because of the high windup on all of their attacks. This matchup is heavily sided towards Samurai over Abyss, unfortunately. Dinakari, Fisherin, and Dazin are the most powerful races for Samurai in my opinion, and heavily counter Abyss Walker. Dinakari gets buffs in damage, mobility, and defense, allowing Samurai to cover all its bases while being extremely offensive. Dazin and Fish shut down attacks for Abyss Walker because they just hit too slow. Fish are more impressive because they have no time limit and can wait for dodge regeneration. Vampire Samurai will send people flying, but their speed will be heavily increased. In this matchup, I'd say watch out for Samurai. I always like to share my opinion on how I think Faceless is broken, but in this matchup it isn't too bad. Faceless players have to get close to Abyss Walkers while Abyss Walkers just have to swing their sword. Although Faceless has the speed advantage, Abyss is easier to defend against faster classes because it has a less precise playstyle. Even if they can swing their sword, they are at a disadvantage due to lack of tomeless, and a single combo could leave them dead. Even though this is the case, I'd still say that Abyss Walker does decently to counteract the hyper Faceless playstyle just due to how low their health is. Faceless has a slight advantage in this fight. Faceless Fisherman is a very volatile build against hard-hitting classes such as Abyss Walkers. Despite needing to get into the Abyss Walkers' range to hit them, the Windshield passive allows them to take any type of punishment from Abyss Walkers. Snarmander is also still meta, so watch out for that. Zin dodges could very well be the end of any kind of Abyss Walker. Running away from the dodges isn't really an option. You will have to take the short end of the stick when you run into a max dodge Zin. This is a special case containing the fact that Mana Shield pretty much counters Shinobi's entire hotbar, except for the dagger throws. You can hide away in your mana bubble and regen because of your armor's baby vamp regen, and pair that with a vampire regen is pretty much just free heals. Shinobis are ridiculously fast and hard to catch. Your best bet is to corner them and swing like your life depends upon it. If the Shinobi has Snarmander, you know the deal. They're going to be very reliant on this spell, and it's going to be very annoying if you get hit by it. If the Abyss is a vampire, an Opal Enchanted Tanto paired with the Backstab multiplier could decimate its HP. Luckily, if you are a vampire, you could go Morvid and Dazin, which have dodges that can easily cancel out this multiplier. Also, Ashen is a pretty tricky race you need to deal with on Shinobi because they have these very weird grapple shoulder throw macros. It goes right through your happy bubble and brings you down faster than your life expectations. Because Spy has such little moves, they will be forced to use a lot of Tomeless. Luckily, Abyss Walker can now sort of counter this by defending and getting up close enough to slap them with an M1. If the Spy ends up using a Rapier, you may actually be in a worse spot. It's pretty tough to deal with fast classes, and just holding blocking its Needle's Eye isn't really going to cut it. If the Spy disarms you, expect him to puppy guard your sword until the end of time. Unfortunately, this is one of the Abyss Walker's worst matchups. Spy is very meta with dodging races like Dazin and Fisherin, as well as Construct and Dinakari. Every single time you try to hit a Spy with dodges, you'll be in a bad spot and will most likely get hit with a spell or Rapier. The other races are just consistently good with this high mobility potential of Spy. If the Spy is a vampire, expect campier playstyles and pray you have an Opal enchant. Lastly, if the Spy has Snarmander, they will use it as if it's an Oni with Demon Step, so expect to be blocking 24/7. In my opinion, Spy triumphs in this fight easily. Deep Knight is one of the scariest classes in game, and their fighting prowess is wonderful in any fight. Abyss Walker do well against slower classes and can shred those with extensive health bars. Nevertheless, Deep Knight is very strong offensively and defensively with range and combos. As an Abyss, if you fail M1 or Wrathful Leap, expect to get chain pulled and impaled. Impaled, it prevents healing and increases the amount of damage taken. As an Abyss Walker, most likely vampire, you do not want to get hit with this. Also, don't even try to Abyssal Scream against a Deep Knight because one combo could spell out your doom. Deep Knight and Chainpull are too strong in this matchup. Deep Knight Fisherins are quite common in the current meta and could possibly be one of the worst things to fight as an Abyss Walker. If they dodge, they will still have the advantage in the fight. Dinakari is also pretty scary just due to the damage they can put out. Talking about Vampire, Deep Knight is commonly played with Fangs, which stack with the class's regeneration capability. Watch out for that because they are extremely tough to kill with his high regeneration. The artifacts these spiders use to run are Frozen as well as Lance Amulet. Expect to get killed even harder if they are carrying around this portable refrigerator. Lannis Amulet just makes them immune to Abyssal Scream, which you shouldn't do against the most consistent combo class in the game, so it's not even that bad. Abyss Walker does lose very hard in this fight though. Dragon Slayer may have finally met its match. Spamming Thunder Spear Crash is no more to the handy mana shield Abyss Walkers have finally obtained. Abyss Walker can now absolutely counter this class, considering most of its moves are mana shieldable. Now all of the D-Slayer's moves can be heavily punished if missed or blocked. Thunder Spear Crash can be punished with their Wrathful Leap, or they can just whap them. In my opinion, I think Dragon Slayer actually gets whooped in this matchup, so I believe Abyss Walkers do very well. Although I believe Abyss Walker is better, there are a couple races that can swing the tide of this fight. Fisherins are a complete counter to Abyss Walkers, considering the dodges regen faster than the swings can hit. Another meta race for Dragon Slayer is Navarin. Because of Light Piercer, they can combo extremely hard and are pretty difficult to deal with. Even with the mana shield Abyss works so hard for, it can easily be removed by Snarvander. That's very difficult to deal with because many Dragon Slayers have Snarvander, which they can spam if they have Wing Soar. If you're a Vampire Abyss Walker, you need to watch out for Fair Frozen Opal enchants. This will disintegrate your health bar if you are not being careful. Personally, I believe that base Abyss Walker does beat Dragon Slayer, but if they do have any of these artifacts or rare spells like Snarvander, it could be a bit harder to deal with. Oni versus Abyss Walker could be a good matchup. A few swings of your sword while Onis do their ballet spins and flips could very well land and ruin their combo. Despite Onis possessing Demon Step, well-timed swings could hit them right through it. If you do land a couple of hits throughout a long fight, it could still be detrimental to fight, considering Onis do not have that much health or regen to dust off an Abyss Walker's powerful strike. If the Abyss Walker doesn't get one comboed, I do believe it wins this matchup. Vampire Onis are extremely common due to their iframes the class gets. Being able to dodge and just heal is very good to have, but your damage output should be enough to put them in the ground. Dodges are still powerful against Abysses, considering their slow, one-handed hits. Dezin, Fisherin, and Morvid Onis are pretty difficult to deal with because they all have iframes added on to their class iframes, which is going to be extremely difficult to deal with as an Abyss Walker. Onis with Snarvander are also very terrifying to fight against with their destructive power that they already have. If the Abyss Walker has Opal against an Oni with Vampirism, they get one shot. If the Oni has Opal against a Abyss Walker that is a vampire, the Abyss Walker will get one shot. I'd say this matchup is pretty balanced. Dragon Sages may be one of the most squishy guys in the game, but their moves do a lot to mess up Abyss Walkers. Abyss Walkers are very reliant on their M1s as well as Wrathful Leap, which are fully countered by Monk Shield. Not only does it block the attack, but it ragdolls them, putting them in a negative position while attacking on block. It's pretty great that Abyss Walker has a way to defend itself from Tomeless spam, but Dragon Sage moves can prevent mana charge easily. I think that Dragon Sage is clearly favored in this matchup. Base Dragon Sage is still one of the more difficult classes for Abyss Walkers to match up against, and it certainly does not help if they have any goodies. Certain meta races that are dodge based again mess up Abyss Walker attacks, which are already hindered by Monk Shield. Increased regen and knockback from Dragon Sage vampires can cause them to play in more of a defensive manner, which is tough to approach as an Abyss. If they have a Spider Cloak, they'll be hard to catch, but about 3 to 4 hits to kill. Any way you look at it, the majority of Abyss Walkers are just not coming out on top in this fight. Bard has nothing in its kit that can really fight Abyss Walker. The disarm could be useful if the Abyss Walker does not have a brain. I think this matchup is comparable to an older brother slapping the crap out of their sibling because they're too loud on the Xbox. Again, this is not very good, but at least the Bard has a disarm. In this matchup, Abyss Walker should lose. It cannot come close to Druid with Verdian and Snap Thoresco. The mana shield is barely useful as most of Druid's skills go through the mana shield. Druid players now like to argue that their class is no longer good because you can block Snap Verdian, but I think that's some kind of BS. Also, pretty much every single Druid Snap, which does poison, will shred Abyss Walker due to how percent damage works. Avoid Druid at all costs, but you may get lucky with some Wrathful Leaps if they forget how to press F. Druids that are Dezin or Fission could quite possibly be the worst thing in the game to fight as an Abyss Walker. I know they don't do crazy damage like Didn't Carry, but the inability to get close and deal any damage at all is even worse. With Druid play involving stunning, chugging potions, and running, nothing good will come out of fighting a Druid in a 1v1. If they have God spells or Snarvator, it's more overkill than anything because you will probably die due to their poison snaps. Another mage class that Abyss Walker has to deal with. It is extremely hard to win in this fight with Snap Dominus being so powerful. With a game out of your control, if you get disarmed, there is literally no counterplay. Your only hope is if they hide behind their mana shield long enough for you to hit them with a Wrathful Leap. The only thing I can really say is if an Illusionist is competent, expect them to be using Snap Dominus. This can be counteracted if you are Dezin, which will flip the tide of this matchup almost entirely. Without having any mobility to run, an Illusionist with a Philo Stone will destroy you. Mages are not very great to fight against. Fighting a competent Necromancer is nearly impossible for an Abyss Walker to do. First of all, the default armor for Necro negates curse stacks, which is the point of the Abyss Walker class. Secondly, a well-timed mana shield can send Abyss to the moon and back. The third thing that Abyss Walkers have to deal with are the critters that Necro can spawn. Shriekers and Howlers paired with an Ignis or Gyarados can start an infinite combo that Abyss Walkers are too slow to escape. Fortunately for Abyss, they do excel up close in this matchup, although it is not fully enough to turn the tides of battle. Well, that pretty much does it for the class matchup portion of Abyss Walker. Now, here's the tier list I have come up for Abyss Walker. This tier list styled graph is an infographic. It's kind of a TLDR, which talks about which classes that Abyss Walker does the best against and which race you want to be. On the left, it shows the classes. As I said, S is the best rank. This is what you want to be fighting as an Abyss Walker, and D is what you do not want to be fighting as an Abyss Walker. So we're going to start off strong in S tier. The classes you want to be fighting are Bard, because Bard does not really have any fighting skills besides Tomeless, and it only has a disarm to deal damage and disarm the Abyss Walker. The other class that Abyss Walker wants to be fighting is a Dragon Slayer. This is not always the case, but many of their moves are extremely punishable by the new Mana Shield on Abyss Walker, and it's very easy to block some of their moves. Their moves have such a long wind-up and they're easily punished. It is S tier in my opinion. In A tier we have Shinobi and Blacksmith. This is what Abyss Walkers want to be fighting, but is not the best thing they could possibly fight. I'd say that Shinobi is up in A tier just because many of their moves are Mana Shieldable. Before they were unblockable, it's very difficult to time them with perfect blocks on Abyss Walker, but now with the new Mana Shield, it's pretty easy to counter them. Blacksmith is kind of in the same boat. Their shards do a lot of damage if they're not blocked, but now they can block them, but their hammer does go through the Mana Shield. I'd say that just because they're tanky and they have a lot of moves that are easy to block, that Abyss Walker does a lot better in this matchup than in other matchups. B tier, this is the true neutral ground, I'd say. It's very balanced for each class. Abyss Walker fights against Sidra Knight and Dark Sidra Knight. It's very balanced. They're very tanky, they have high damage capability, but they, it's a lot of back and forth. It's going to be a pretty long fight. It's not one-shotting either class. I'd say they balance these classes fairly well. Also now, Abyss Walker actually has a defense against Sidra Knight and Dark Sidra Knight with the Mana Shield, so many of their charges and Tomeless spam, Black Flame stuff, it can be blocked with a Mana Shield. I believe this is now a balanced fight for both Sigil and Dark Sigil. Down in C tier, we're kind of approaching the I don't want to be fighting this as an Abyss Walker. I put Oni on there, even though I do believe Oni is more of a balanced matchup than you think, but I put Oni in C tier just because of the damage capability. If they do land a pretty good combo, that could do a lot to anybody in the game, so I'm going to put it down in C tier. Same with Faceless, they have little health, they can actually get one-shotted by a Wrathful Leap and combo with the M1s, but I put them in C tier just because they have high damage capability and are extremely solid in this meta. Also Spies in C tier just due to the fact that they're Tomeless spamming, they're going to be using Needle's Eye, which is tough to block, and they're also going to be disarming the Abyss Walker. Abyss Walker is nothing without its weapon, so this is extremely strong. Finally, we get down to D tier where there's a lot of stuff that truly counters Abyss Walker. All of the mage classes are down there just because they cannot really deal with stuns from Druid, stuns from Illusionist, they cannot do much. If they do get disarmed, they cannot use Tomeless to fight, it's very difficult for them to approach. And Necromancer is obviously there because they swing too slow. If they spawn zombies or howlers, there's no way they're going to be able to knock them away if there's so many of them getting hit. The other classes in there are Deep Knight and Samurai. I have both of those in there just because of the combo potential and damage output of them. For Deep Knight, it's more like they wait and then you can do an Impale combo or something like that, and it's bit more defensive. Samurai is very fast and is very difficult to be touched at all. And even if they are going to get hit, they have a countering move which is easy to read on Abyss Walkers, because Abyss Walkers have really long windups. All you got to do is counter that, and they can't run from you. They're going to get hit with a combo right after that. The last thing that they don't want to be fighting is a Dragon Sage. Dragon Sage is extremely hard to catch and is very fast. If they have a Spider Cloak, if they're Vampire, if they're Homeless, they're going to be moving around a lot. Even if the Abyss Walker manages to hit them, if they have a Mana Shield or a Monk Shield up, it's going to ragdoll them and they're going to be put in a combo. And even though they have the new Mana Shield, Dragon Sage just disables mana, so even if they want to get into a position where they can defend from Tomeless, all the Dragon Sage has to do is hit him once. Now we're moving on to the right hand side of the chart here. We have our races. These are the races you want to be as an Abyss Walker. In S tier we have the best possible race, which is Morbid. I think Featherfeet for mobility options and Flock to escape combos to get iframes or maybe heal is very strong. They can also go Vampire, which is an upside. Hassledon and Dinner are up here due to their damage capability. I think both of them can do really good damage. Hassledon does have the ability to have, I think, 2 times damage, while Dinner has a little bit less damage capability, but they do have defense as well as speed, which puts them in S tier. I'm going to say Casperin is also in S tier just because of the damage resistance it gets, and you get Respair. You cannot go Tomeless on Abyss Walker, so this is the closest you're going to get to using Ignis. I also put Seraph and Lich on the right hand side, because if you do get Tomeless and you can go Abyss Walker, I'd say this is extremely strong. If they have Snap Gyarados, I mean, there's nothing really holding Abyss Walker back anymore. Down in A tier, which are fantastic races, but they're still not the best, I'd say that Dezin is always good just to the basic dodges in ESP. It's good for Vampire, but it's nothing to really increase the movement speed, damage, or defense like Hassledon or Dinakari. Not the best, but it is pretty nice if you want to have dodges. Metal Scrum is good just to the damage reduction and Steel Skin, and Exhaust is pretty good for making people back off of you in a combo. Fishrin, it's just there for the dodges. Very nice to have if you want to be defensive. Unfortunately, you cannot go Vampire, which does put it a little bit lower. Gaia has increased health as well as climb speed. It doesn't need Vampire because it can repair like a Metal Scrum, but I do think it is pretty strong enough to be an A tier just due to the climb speed that it has. Cameo is also an A tier, which is surprising because Cameo is pretty much built for something that doesn't need Tomeless and can pretty much boss raid. It's the perfect use for Viking's Amulet, and I'd say if you go Abyss Walker, you don't need the Tomeless, so Cameo is pretty good. Down in B tier, we have Madrasian. Madrasian is pretty neat and you can hide the Abyss Walker sword, but it's very situational. I'd say you could scare people, I guess, if you want to be a trinket and then just pull out your sword and start hitting them. It's pretty funny. Not too great, I'd say. Stays in B tier from mediocre. Riggin Vampire Abyss Walker is also very fast. It's very fast. It's very similar to running and chasing speed as a Dinakari. Since they do have Flood and double mana charge, they're like Sonic, so you're gonna have to be careful. Wouldn't say it's that great, just because, you know, it's just mana difference. That's all it is. We have Dolahan in B tier as well because the combos from Pumping Bomb are pretty good. Unfortunately, the only thing that's really holding them back is that they cannot go Vampire, so it's not really that good. Construct is also in B tier just because of the revives. The Abyss Walker doesn't have that much mobility to run away and chug potions, but I'd say fighting a Vampire Abyss Walker that has 2 lives is pretty tough to do. Moving down to C tier, we're starting with Navarin. Navarin does not have many options because you can only really take sword skills that have a greatsword skill. Nothing good on this. We have Vind also in C tier. They have the increased move speed and spell reflection, which is okay for Abyss Walkers, but now they actually have a mana shield. You no longer need to be Vind to block attacks now. It's pretty much just a downgrade because you cannot go Vampire on Vind. Azael is also on here because they have increased mana charge, and it's kind of situational if you want to be immune to Ignis. I think the only reason why you'd want to do this is just because you would have increased mana charge and also gate. D tier, this is the worst possible races you can be as an Abyss Walker. We're starting off, well, bad with Scroom. You can have the regeneration, there's no damage reduction like Metal Scroom, you just get heal in the floor. You're immune to poison and you can't get broken bones, which is pretty nice, but I'd say it is not much for combat potential. Also, as a Scroom, you get bullied by people just because of your race, so you know that's a downgrade. Next, we have Ashen and its Shoulder Throw. Again, people will say that there's combos for Ashen into Abyss Walker M1s, which is some kind of BS. Your M1s send really far away, so if you're a Vampire, you cannot Shoulder Throw into one M1, like it's just going to send away. It would be interesting to see, but it's not very consistent and it sounds very tough to land. The worst possible race you can be as a Abyss Walker is Castellan. Castellans get 2 snaps and increased mana charge, which the increased mana charge is alright, but you might as well be a Riggin. Pretty much just benefits you when you have Tomeless, you can have 2 snaps, but again, Abyss Walker has a ban on Tomeless, they cannot get Tomeless. Anyway, that's my take on Abyss Walker and how the matchups are, how your races you should be, all that type of stuff. I would recommend if you are going to make an Abyss Walker, you should go Vampire, and if you do get an artifact, you should pick Atlantis. In my opinion, this is not the best class in the game, and definitely there are better ones to come. If you do enjoy this content, I will keep on making it, and I'll try to finish the Gaia guides before Deep Woken releases.
I miss the old Punchy, straight out of cash Punchy, dug it merge Punchy, on his grind Punchy. I hate the new Punchy, the low views Punchy, the always lose Punchy, selling in twos Punchy. I miss the meek Punchy, helping the seas Punchy. I gotta say, at that time I'd like to meet Punchy. See, I invented Punchy, it wasn't any Punchy, and now I look around and there's so many Punchy. I used to love Punchy, I used to love Punchy. I even had the taped up headset, thought I was Punchy. What if Punchy made a video about Punchy? Gotta miss the old Punchy, man, that'd be so Punchy. That's all it was, Punchy. We still love Punchy, and I love you like Punchy loves Punchy.